Hello and welcome to the Amazing Spider-Man Podcast. Yes, we are not an Amazing Spider-Man Podcast. We are the Amazing Spider-Man Podcast. I am your host and webmaster of theamazingspiderman.com, Jonathan Weber. And joining me today for the podcast, we have Mr. Thomas Patterson.
Hello, everybody.
Yes, Thomas was just laughing at me because I just accidentally referred to our podcast by our previous name. So, that was a bit of a tangent.
It's not really shocking. Let's be completely honest. We always knew he was kind of a dunce. So
let's see. What is my GPA this semester? Probably like a 2.0.
Mine's a 4.15.
Overall GPA or this semester?
That's this semester and pretty close to my overall GPA.
Oh, see, my overall GPA is a 3.91. Yeah, 3.91.
Yeah, I have a 4.05.
I know someone who has a 4.5 after his freshman year.
That's not entirely shocking. They really offer AP classes really soon. No.
Yeah, it's... This kid in my school, I'm pretty sure he has a 4.5 GPA. He's a junior now, but at the time of the end of our freshman year, he had a 4.5 GPA, and it was ridiculous. He probably has higher than that now, which it's ridiculous. But how's it going, Thomas? What you been up to this week?
No, not all that much. Quite honestly, I took 2 AP tests this week. One for AP Lang and one for AP Environmental. Apparently, she still wants to go see the movie, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but we still haven't been able to go see it because she's had stuff going on. So I don't know when that's going to happen, but she wants the entire class to go.
Which is awesome. I just want to say that.
So we'll see how that works out in the future, but it'll probably be one of the first days of summer with the way it's been going. But
yes, when does your summer vacation start?
It starts May. Well, I have a half day May 29th, and then May 30th is my first full day off.
See, I don't get off school till June 4th. But technically I'm done with school now because I took all of my college class finals, and so I only have my band class left at my high school. So technically I'm done, which is awesome.
I have a Spanish final and a physics final, and then I think that's pretty much it.
No, physics is BS. I'm just going to say that right now.
It's all right. I don't have too much of a problem with it.
I got an A on my physics final, but it's still BS. Whatever. I don't like physics. I don't like it at all. Even though I got an A, but whatever.
Nobody cares no more.
Shut up. So, yes, for those of you wondering, we are recording this on a Friday night, and yes, I'd like to point out that my junior prom is tonight, and I'm at home sitting around recording a podcast.
Priorities.
Yes, go me. I'm sorry, I refuse to go to prom because it's freaking stupid.
It is. Especially prom.
Prom is freaking stupid. It's a night that will change your life. Go fuck yourself.
Well, especially junior prom.
Yeah,
it's even derogatory in the name itself.
Yeah, it's just, oh my gosh, I can't stand prom. I can't stand the idea of it. I can't stand the process behind it. I can't stand anything about prom. And I could probably get a date to prom if I wanted to. Maybe that sounds narcissistic, but I have people that will back me up on that statement. But I refuse to go to prom because it's freaking stupid, and it's all about objectifying women, which is, to me,
true. That's true.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
So,
feminists that we are, guys. That's right.
That is unfortunately what our society has deemed appropriate.
Exactly.
It's unfortunate. It really is.
Did you know that chivalry is actually anti-feminist as well? Because it implies that women can't do anything themselves and that men have to do everything for them.
It just, oh my gosh, I can't even get into the politics of women talk. I will make a whole podcast about that.
Oh my god, we should totally just do a spin-off podcast that has nothing to do with Spider-Man about it.
We should, but I'm not going to. Because
okay.
I'm that damn lazy.
That would take too much time.
in terms of what I've been up to this week, well, I actually got some stuff in the mail this week. I got those Marvel Legend figures for the Amazing Spider-Man 2. I picked up Spider-Man and Electro for $10 each, which is honestly still more than they're probably worth. But at least it wasn't $25. That's ridiculous.
Well, I mean, at least they articulate. Like, unlike the regular toys that they have that don't really articulate, they're $10 at my Target. So.
And the Marvel Legends figures that I got are normally worth $25, and honestly, they're not even worth that much. It's they're horribly overpriced. But I quite like them. They're actually fairly solid figures. I particularly like the Electro figure a lot. I think it looks very good aesthetic-wise, and he comes with two different heads, two different sets of hands, and it's really actually kind of fun. But as far as anything else I've been up to this week, not really much. I've just been taking finals. Found out that I'm taking too much of my medication, but other than that, yeah. So, shall we tackle news now, or do we have anything else that we want to say? I don't think I have anything else. But moving on to news topics now. Shit, I just closed what I needed to have up, so that's going terribly. I just accidentally closed the first news topic. Gosh damn it. See, I caught myself there. I didn't use the Lord's name in vain. I'm a good Christian.
Oh, wow.
I am not a good Christian. Not a good Christian at all.
Well, don't worry, I'm not either. So
I will admit I am not a good Christian at all.
No, me neither. So
all right. But I guess our first news topic this week is something that I put on the front page today: Ultimate Spider-Man Web Warriors. Yeah, this is interesting. A pic of a badge from a New York comic convention has shown up on the internet. I personally found this through CBR's Twitter, but it features some animation from the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, and features Spider-Man and several other Spider-Men drawn in a similar style, such as Miles Morales Spider-Man, Spider-Man Noir, what appears to be Spider-Man 2099. And so everyone's talking about this. What is it? Is this a spin-off video game? To me, that's what I think this is, but I don't have any, sources to back that theory up with. But Thomas, what do you think Ultimate Spider-Man Web Warriors is?
I'm actually starting to get the impression, and this is, I don't really know for sure, it says Sunday Kids, so I'm starting to think that it might be the new Ultimate Spider-Man show. That's what they're naming the next season. Instead of just having it Ultimate Spider-Man, we're going to have the Web Warriors, because now apparently he's going to be in the Avengers show as well. So they're going to have to do something a little different to make Ultimate Spider-Man still relevant. So I'm thinking that they might just bring in a whole bunch of other Spider-Man and just make it a Spider-Man show.
You know what I think would make Ultimate Spider-Man more relevant?
What?
Cancel it and bring back Spectacular.
Give back the animation rights to Sony. They were doing such a great job.
They were. Come on. They were doing a fantastic job.
It's funny because everyone's always talking about how if Marvel got the rights back, the movies would be so much better. But I think that the animation stuff just proved that wrong, that it's not always going to be better. It could be. We don't know for sure. But
speaking of the movies, I want to point this out right now. A lot of you were expecting the podcast today to actually be the movie podcast. That is going to be coming out within the week. We've had to push the recording of that back because James unfortunately had a death in the family, and so he needs to attend to that, and I don't want to do that without everybody here. So, first of all, James, our condolences go out to you and your family. That's actually why he's not here right now. But we will be recording the movie podcast within the week, and it will be up before next week's show. So that was the one thing I wanted to mention just before we continue.
Yeah, and before we get really going, I want to also say that my thoughts and condolences are with you and your family, James. I really hope you can get through this time, and I'm sorry about everything that's been happening. So
yes. But back on top, we're going to switch from mortality to Ultimate Spider-Man. That's a hell of a shift. But Ultimate Spider-Man Web Warriors, personally, I wouldn't mind if this was the next season. of Ultimate Spider-Man. That hasn't been confirmed yet. I know some things have been confirmed about Ultimate Spider-Man Season 3. Like, I know they're bringing in Agent Venom, and they're, of course, doing a 2-episode crossover with Marvel's Avengers Assemble, but I don't really know too much about Season 3. Do we even know a tentative air date for it yet? Because it's the middle of May.
I don't think so.
It's the middle of May, and it still hasn't started, which really surprises me.
I would think that it would have started right after the movie, honestly.
I would have thought that, honestly, it would have started probably back in March, because, I mean, it took them all of last year to air Season 2, but granted, they took, like, 4 months off for a break at one point.
Yeah, that's true. But, I'm starting to think that even if they weren't going to air it, they would have, like, announced it, like, the weekend before The Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out in the United States. You would have thought that they'd announced it then.
Honestly, I mean, I don't care, honestly, because I'm not...
Yeah, me neither.
I hate Ultimate Spider-Man. I sat through...
The Passion of 1,000 Suns.
I sat through 2 seasons of it, and that's not a good show. I'm really hoping that maybe we can get a better Spider-Man cartoon in the near future, but this Ultimate Web Warriors doesn't sound like a bad concept to me. I mean, I know a lot of people have been speculating around last year that maybe Marvel was going to bring in a Spider-Man team book, and I thought that could be kind of a cool idea. Maybe this is their animation version of that. I don't know, but...
It seems to be like their kind of answer to Spider-Verse.
That's exactly where I was going with that, is this could be their answer to Spider-Verse, and correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't all these Spider-Men going to be in Spider-Verse? Like all
they
these
said every Spider-Man ever is going to be in Spider-Verse, so...
Even the animation Spider-Man and all that, so personally, I'm kind of hoping for a 90s Spider-Man, Christopher Daniel Barnes Spider-Man, but that's just me. Because that voice is sexy. Just kidding. I'm going to stop that sentence right there. All right. But Ultimate Spider-Man Web Warriors, I don't think there's anything really important with this, but it's just something to speculate about, something kind of fun to talk about on the podcast. I'm pretty sure both of us hate Ultimate Spider-Man. James is the resident Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon reviewer as of Season 3 starting, so it's too bad that he couldn't be here to give his opinion on this, but ultimately, it's not that big of a deal. So, final thoughts on Ultimate Spider-Man Web Warriors?
I think the concept is interesting, and I mean, if it's going to be the TV show, I would have way more faith in it if Marvel had just said, hadn't come out with a Spider-Man cartoon yet, and had their 2 average outings with the Hulks and the Agents of Smash, and Avengers Assemble, their average outings, and then brought out Ultimate Spider-Man, I would have had a little bit more faith in this, but as of right now, I'm just kind of meh on it, because Ultimate Spider-Man is terrible.
Yeah, it is. But moving on to our next news topic now, we got Spider-Man dominating the April comic sales charts. Yes, courtesy of CBR, we got some sales figures for April comics, and Amazing Spider-Man #1 and Superior Spider-Man #31 were the 2 highest-selling comic books across the entire comic industry, which is really cool. Amazing Spider-Man in particular got over 500,000 books sold, which is pretty damn impressive. This isn't something that we can like give our thoughts on or anything, but I think we can both say that this is fairly cool. It's good to see Spider-Man, selling well again, getting back into the public eye. I mean, come on, let's be realistic here. A lot of this probably does have to do with the fact that 1, it was a #1, and 2, the movie's coming out. The movie came out, so.
And I think the Amazing Spider-Man 2, #2, we're going to experience another drop. I don't think it's going to be 500,000 sales. Let's be completely honest. It's probably going to drop a lot.
#2s do not sell as well as #1s.
That's absolutely true.
That's a basic fact.
Well, also, ASM #1 came out right before Free Comic Book Day.
Yeah, Free Comic Book Day was last weekend. I completely forgot about that.
Yeah.
Amazing Spider-Man #1 and Superior 31 being the 2 highest selling comic books of the month of April. I think that's really cool. It's good to see some Spider-Man getting back into the public eye and getting some good sales figures again. I know it hasn't really been selling well. I mean, Superior has sold relatively well, but in between One More Day and Superior Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man was not selling well at all. So it's good to see Amazing Spider-Man in particular selling well. And ultimately, I think it's just really cool. So, Thomas, thoughts on Spider-Man dominating April sales?
Well, I think it's a lot of matter of circumstance, and I don't want to take away from this too much, but with the new movie coming out, also the fact that number ones are really big, and Free Comic Book Day, I think it was kind of bound to happen this way. Not that I'm trying to go against it too much, I'm just trying to explain a little bit more of why it's probably so big, but I'm glad to see this getting Peter a lot of exposure, and also I really hope that this sales figure shows that you don't have to kill off Peter Parker again to try to get this kind of reaction out of people, and hopefully he'll continue to sell well so that Dan Slott doesn't go like, oh, well, sales were better with Doc Ock.
Well, I'll be quite honest with you. I anticipate sales dropping just based on the quality of Amazing Spider-Man #1.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be quite honest with you.
I really hope number 2 is better. I really, really, really do.
Yeah, because number 1 was disappointing. I'll just say that right now.
Yeah.
If you didn't listen to our last episode, yeah, not the best grades from us. Not terrible grades, but not the best. Not what we'd like to have given a number 1.
Yeah.
But next news topic is actually concerning the movie and Amazing Spider-Man 2. Thomas, did you happen to do this Shazam thing with the end credits scene at any point?
I didn't have Shazam, but they released there was a site that released all the pictures that they got from the Shazam thing 2 weeks ago. So I saw it then.
Yeah,
and they're cool, I guess.
I got the Shazam app on my phone, and I did it specifically for this movie because I saw on Twitter, Shazam the end credit scene and unlock a look into the sinister future of Spider-Man.
Exactly.
And so I got that app, and I completely forgot to do it when I went to see the film again yesterday. But I saw these pictures online on comingsoon.net, and I thought that they were worth posting on the front page. It's really just a look at some villains. I mean, is this the Sinister Six lineup? We don't know yet. But
actually, I think they even clarified that this was the villains that were going to be in The Amazing Spider-Man 3 because Drew Goddard even came out and said he wasn't really sure who was going to be there.
See, here's the thing. I mean, who do we have in this lineup? We have Kraven, I think this one picture is. The Goblin, obviously, because you see the glider. Doc Ock, the arms. Rhino, the horn. Vulture, the wings. And then this last picture is kind of like somebody's eye. We don't know quite who that is. A lot of people are saying it's either Mysterio or Chameleon. Personally, I'm hoping for Mysterio because Chameleon in the movie sounds like shit. Mainly because Chameleon is a one-trick pony who does not belong in a movie. But, yeah, I don't really know what to think of this. If these are the villains for The Amazing Spider-Man 3, I think they did a good job with Amazing Spider-Man 2. Like I said last week, I gave it an A+, and I still give it an A+ after 3 showings of it. But I don't know if I want to see the Sinister Six this early. I'm kind of really hoping that they hold out for Amazing Spider-Man 4 to show the Sinister Six, so that each villain can kind of get an introductory movie so that we can see each of them in their glory individually, and then we can see them all as a team together in Amazing Spider-Man 4.
Yeah, I was really hoping that too. That kind of idea coming out of it. Although I think the cat thing is probably Black Cat. We obviously know who Dr. Octopus is. I'm hoping that the mask is Mysterio. We have Vulture's wings. A lot of people were speculating that Calm Fior might actually be playing Vulture, but I sincerely doubt it after The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And Rhino and Goblin we obviously know.
Calm Fior, I think, would have made an excellent Adrian Toomes. But
Yeah.
I'm pushing, you know who I'm pushing for? They said that John Malkovich was supposed to be Vulture in Spider-Man 4. That sounds awesome to me.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think John Malkovich could pull off the role of Adrian Toomes quite well. But really, these Shazam pictures, I mean, they're interesting. They're not really clear shots. We don't really see that much. But if this is the lineup of the Sinister Six, I think it's a fairly decent lineup. It's not anything terrible. I mean, some of these are from the comics, and some of them, obviously, like the Green Goblin, the Rhino, and if this is the Chameleon, then he wasn't in the original Sinister Six. But, you know, people like Doc Ock, Kraven, Vulture, they were in the original Sinister Six, and, you know, that'd be a nice callback to the comics. I find it interesting that Harry and, well, we're assuming that it's going to be Harry as the Goblin. I find it interesting that Harry and Doc Ock are both going to be in the Sinister Six at the same time. I definitely think that's going to bring a sense of power struggle between them, because Doc Ock is not a character that will willingly take orders from somebody, you know, unless it's season 4 of the 90s animated series and he's working for the Kingpin, but we won't reference that. But Doc Ock has, at least in the comics, has never been one to take orders from somebody, so it'll be interesting to see that power struggle dynamic between the Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus. So if that is the lineup, then that'll be a very interesting lineup to see, and ultimately I think it could be a very interesting movie. Of course, we also have the Sinister Six movie, which is directed by Drew Goddard, I believe. We reported on that a couple weeks ago. And, yeah, he said he doesn't even know who the lineup is going to be, so maybe this is the lineup, maybe it isn't, but ultimately, I guess all we can do right now is speculate.
I want more Electro!
Yeah, The Amazing Spider-Man 3 is, you know, obviously still 2 years out. We just finished Amazing Spider-Man 2, and frankly, that's what I would like to focus on right now, is the awesomeness of that movie, and not what's going to be coming up. So, ultimately, final thoughts on the end credit Shazam?
I guess it's cool. I would have much preferred an after credits scene that actually showed some footage, although, from what I gather from the ending of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, it almost seems like when Mr. Fears is supposed to be walking in to talk to Harry, that almost seems like what was originally intended to be the after credits scene. And because of the X-Men copyright thing, they had to put the X-Men in the after credits scene instead.
Yes.
And so that's why I felt like the ending of the film, for me, didn't work as well, because it just felt like they kind of had to push it there just in order to tease the Sinister Six, because it really did feel like a Sinister Six tease to me.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the Mark Webb negotiations with Fox and how they ultimately forced him to advertise Days of Future Past for free. I still think that I would have much preferred an actual post-credit scene. But the post-credit scene, I don't know if, I'm pretty sure you saw this article, of apparently the gentleman going up to Norman Osborn's frozen head and saying, "It's time to wake up, my friend." I was like, that sounds like crap.
Well, I think they originally were going to kind of go with that, and then Sony was like, no, we want to do Sinister Six. And so I think what they were planning on doing for The Amazing Spider-Man 3 kind of changed after that. They're like, oh, so we better do Doc Ock instead of like a Norman Osborn thing. So they tied out Norman Osborn, got rid of him, made Harry the big bad for Peter's Rogues Gallery, and just went along with that instead.
And we'll talk about Harry more in-depth on the Amazing Spider-Man 2 in-depth discussion podcast. But I kind of like Harry as being, you know, kind of the big bad of this franchise. I kind of like that.
I kind of like that too. I think it'll provide an interesting dynamic that wasn't present during the Sam Raimi trilogy, because obviously Peter and Norman were enemies, and then Harry took on that kind of friend that I kind of want to help kind of element. Whereas this one, it's just pure old friend that turned on me, and now I have to fight him until one of us dies.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to other news topics now. We got Amazing Spider-Man 2 opening weekend grossed $92 million in the United States. This is according to CNN. It is currently the #1 film in the United States, and despite mixed reviews, many people are more than thrilled with it. A lot of casual viewers are really enjoying it. So again, this is just something we can mention in passing. It's great that Amazing Spider-Man 2 is making a lot of money. So it's hopefully going to be a box office success if it isn't already. Thomas, do you have the current figures for us in terms of the box office?
Well, current figures as of last night, because they don't have the domestic totals or the foreign totals for today yet. They always update it the next morning with them. But as of last night, it has grossed $110,700,722 domestically, and then in the foreign number, it's got $340 million, pretty much exactly. So the worldwide total comes to $450 million, give or take about $1 million.
All right, that's pretty decent. So, that's a pretty decent grossing just for well, what's it been out internationally for? 3 weeks?
It's going to be 3 weeks. Yeah, 3 weeks today. Yep.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's about 3 weeks. So that's a decent grossing. It's not Avengers level, but obviously we weren't expecting it to be. But honestly, I kind of would have expected this movie to gross a little bit more by this point.
Well, yeah, but I think one of the bigger markets was China, and it just opened in China.
Did it really?
Yeah, it opened on Sunday, actually, so they got it after we did.
Oh,
they were really slowly rolling out the international. Like, I think the only people that got it 3 weeks ago today were the United Kingdom and a few other smaller European countries.
Belgium.
Mm-hmm. And then they started rolling it out into, like, Mexico and stuff, so.
All right.
It's been a really small international rollout.
But, it's great that it made $92 million on its opening weekend here in the U.S. It's good that it's making a crap ton of money. The more money these things make, the more movies we get. I'm just kind of disgusted with the 54% rating it has on...
It has 55 now.
Oh, is it 55? It went up 1%. Victory. Isn't that still a rotten rating, though?
Yeah, it is.
That disgusts
it's
me.
It's actually 1% below Man of Steel, even though Man of Steel, Superman killed people, and not only just Zod, but actual civilians.
Isn't that also 1%? Let me look this up. I'm pretty damn sure that Amazing Spider-Man 2 actually has a lower score than Transformers 1. Let me look this up right now.
I think it has a lower score than Spider-Man 3 as well.
Oh, I know it does. I know for a fact that it does, because Spider-Man 3 had a 63%.
Mm-hmm.
Let me look. Rotten Tomatoes reported that 57% for Transformers 1. Damn.
Yep.
That is bad. That sucks.
Oh, to be fair, I think critics have actually gotten a lot more critical of these action movies as time has gone on. I mean, Iron Man 2 has like a 73%, and I think The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is what Iron Man 2 should have been. Whereas I felt like the Iron Man was what The Amazing Spider-Man 1 should have been as an establishment of the universe. Whereas The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is what the kind of world building that Marvel wanted to accomplish in Iron Man 2, that it just didn't work in that film, and it works in this one much better. So,
I am disgusted by that. Are you kidding me? It's got a lower score than Transformers? Are you kidding me? I'm not going to let that go. I'm going to rant about that until that goes up. I'm not going to let that go. I'm not letting that go. All right, but moving on to our final news topic. We got Amazing Spider-Man 2 cast and crew talk, the movie's ending, spoilers if you haven't seen the movie yet, but it's been out for a week. If you haven't seen it by this point, shame on you.
Go see it now. Just stop this podcast, grab your coat, go out and go see it. I think I'm going to go try to drag my friend to go see it tomorrow.
Oh, I'm going again tomorrow. I know for sure, because I'm going again and I'm going to work, so...
Yeah, I think I'll drag my friend along for it.
Because the movie theater is literally right by where I work, so it's awesome. I can literally walk from the movie theater to where I work, so I just figured,
That's cool.
what the hell? I'll go see it, then I'll go to work.
Yeah.
But speaking about the death of the Gwen Stacy character, Emma Stone had to say that I knew from the very beginning what the intention was for Gwen's arc. I thought it was executed well. And then Matt Tolmach just basically talked about how they were all terrified to kill off Gwen because the immensely positive feedback to her and Garfield's relationship on screen, plus her great acting ability. They were like, are we effing nuts? But they said, you know what, we felt that we needed to do it.
It's an obligation to the canon.
Andrew Garfield basically said the same thing. And then when asked if Emma Stone would come back for Amazing Spider-Man 3 or future Amazing Spider-Man films, Emma Stone responded with, I've been trying to think of ways that make sense to bring her back, but absolutely, I'm up for doing anything Spider-Man related. So the first thing I want to say is, thank gosh, Emma Stone is, it seems like Emma Stone's a Spider-Man fan, which honestly is really kind of cool.
Yeah. She was talking in an interview, and she said that there was a storyline in the comics that would allow her to bring it back, and I keep thinking 70s Clone Saga. I mean, like, I'd be more okay with that. I talked about how okay with that I would be. I just don't want them to do 90s Clone Saga. If they're going to do a Clone Saga, do the 70s and then leave it alone. Do not do 90s. Please, dear God, do not.
See, here's my thoughts on that. I don't want any sort of a Clone Saga in these films. I'd rather just her kind of be appearing to Peter like a hallucination.
Like what happened with George Stacy in this one?
Kind of like that, only she actually speaks, and doesn't just stand there with a badass pose.
Or looking at him, like...
Just kind of scowling at him. I mean, George Stacy didn't say anything, but he had such a presence.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't say anything, but he was just like, the look on his face, that was easy money for Dennis Leary.
Yeah.
But, you know what? Our opinions on Gwen's death, I think we made it fairly clear in our first impressions of the film last week. We quite liked Gwen's death. We thought it was done very well, and it seems like...
About as well as you could expect.
Yeah, honestly, I think I still say that Andrew Garfield crying over Gwen's corpse is easily the best scene in the movie, just because it hits you that hard, and Garfield just nails it. He nailed it probably better than Tobey Maguire ever would have been able to, because Tobey Maguire couldn't even pull off Harry's death, so that speaks to... I don't even want to imagine what he would have tried to do had Gwen died. I don't even want to try to imagine that, because he couldn't even pull off Harry's death. But you know what? This is just a nice little interview talking about the Gwen death. Emma Stone saying that, I'd be up for doing anything else Spider-Man related. So I think it's a pretty decent interview. Not anything really big and specific, but you know what? It's a decent one. Talking about, excuse me. Matt Tolmach saying, it's a big, big risk, but I thought we could pull it off, and I think we ultimately did it well. I would agree with him there. I mean, Garfield's acting in the scene was absolutely fantastic. I mean, I still say, and I just said this a minute ago, so I'm kind of repeating myself, but it is the best scene in the movie, and ultimately I did feel it was a great scene. So, Thomas, any thoughts on the interview about the death of Gwen?
I definitely liked it. Obviously, I think they probably told Emma Stone the first time when she got the role that we're planning on killing her in the second movie. So, and then she went like, oh, I guess I'll go research that. And and she's been making it quite clear that was something that she really wanted to do. But for me, it's really a shame that she's not in the franchise anymore. So I really do hope that they kind of do like the little flashback thing. Obviously, I've stated before that I'm alright doing the Clone Saga as long as it's handled well, but obviously John and I have differing opinions on that. I guess it just depends on how well it's executed. Because I think they could execute the 70s one really well. Probably not the 90s one, but the 70s. But that's just my opinion, so...
Alright, but that's going to do it for the news topics this week. There wasn't a whole lot to talk about this week, but hey, there was probably more than last week, so you know what, that's decent enough. But moving on to reviews now, we got 2 current issues this week. Well, technically 3 if you count the Amazing Spider-Man Who Am I digital series. But I'm not really counting that because, one, I read the first issue of that, and yeah, I read that. That's not a good comic. But Amazing. We got Amazing Spider-Man 1.1, which is Learning to Crawl #1, and Miles Morales Ultimate Spider-Man #1. I think we're going to start off with Miles Morales Ultimate Spider-Man #1, and Thomas was kind enough to post a review of Miles Morales Ultimate #1 on the front page of the site. So Thomas, we're going to give this one to you. Why don't you take us through this one? Give us your thoughts and your grade and your breakdown and all that wonderful stuff.
All right. Hold on just one second. Sorry, having dinner during the podcast. I know, but I'm really hungry. All right, so basically the issue starts out basically trying to catch the reader up on basically what happened in Cataclysm. It starts off with the Shield guy about to lose his job because Shield was destroyed following Cataclysm. And this government guy comes in and he sees Norman Osborn sitting there, and he's all like, I thought he was dead. And then the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent is just like, that's what Nick Fury wanted you to believe. It basically brings up the question, what does it take to freaking kill Norman Osborn? Because this guy obviously is never going to freaking die. But anyway. And then we fast forward to Miles and Kate Bishop's romance that's going on at their boarding school and stuff, and they're talking and they're basically bringing the reader up to speed on what happened with Miles's father and how his father walked out on him after he revealed he was Spider-Man to his father, and his father blamed him for his mother's death because, for those who don't know, during the Venom arc, she got caught in the crossfire trying to save Miles because she actually found out that it was Miles it was underneath the mask, and so she tried to save him, and she ended up getting caught in the crossfire and died. So that's why he says his father said that he was responsible for his mother's death, and it basically just goes to the boarding school person basically saying, "Oh, that's it." And so then we basically see two men talking about how Captain America's definitely going to come back because, you know, superheroes always come back. And then they get attacked by two Spider-Men. I don't know where this story's going. I guess it's interesting. And then Miles and Gank are talking about what happened with oh yeah, we also see Norman Osborn basically say, "You're all going to burn," and blow up the truck that he's being transported in, and then that's all we see of him. That's it. And then Gank and Miles are talking about whether they should reveal, whether Miles should reveal his secret to Kate. And basically, Gank tells him no, and Miles basically says, "F you, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to go talk to MJ about it." And MJ basically says that it's basically like asking, "Do you want to marry me?" to someone, because basically you belong to that person once you tell them that big of a secret, because obviously Mary Jane and Peter, basically, they were as close, and they basically had determined that they were going to get married because of that, because they knew each other's secret. And then after he gets back to his apartment, Miles does the thing he apparently does every day, asking if his dad came back to the apartment, and he finds Peter Parker rustling through all his stuff.
And that concludes the issue. The issue leaves off with Peter Parker? I was hoping to get some of my stuff back. It's more than time for the original Spider-Man to get back into the game. To be continued. And they make you go to marvel.com/letter pages to get the letter pages. So, Thomas...
Cheap ass bastards. Couldn't afford the paper.
Yes. Instead, they put in an advertisement for... What is this? Road Force Wrecked and Ruined? I don't even know what the crap that is. But pros, cons, grade, Thomas, all that stuff.
All right, so pros. I like the kind of dynamic that Gank and Miles have. It feels very much like, you know, two best friends talking to each other the whole time. So I definitely like that aspect about it. I definitely never hated it. The only time I kind of hated it was when Miles was basically. He didn't say this directly to him, but he was basically like, "F you, I'm not taking what you're saying to heart. I'm gonna go talk to MJ about it." And then MJ and Miles' talk is obviously I liked it. It was very sentimental. MJ strolling down memory lane. I definitely liked the scenes with Peter Parker's cast and Miles talking to Miles. And then the end reveal, which caught me off guard, I will admit. I definitely liked the end reveal. I doubt it's Peter Parker because knowing Marvel, they would have put out a giant press release in USA Today about how Peter Parker came back in the Ultimate Universe. So I doubt this is the real Peter Parker. If it is, fantastic. But honestly, I'm going to try to keep my expectations low. And that's about it for the pros for me. The cons, it just seemed like there was a lot going on in this issue for one issue, especially with Bendis' writing style, where nothing ever gets resolved in one issue. So it just seemed like he was just throwing plot points at us and saying, oh, it'll all be resolved later, it's all okay. But it didn't really feel like a number one for me for that reason, kind of in the same way that it didn't feel like a number one for me in the Amazing Spider-Man number one. Obviously, Bendis has always done this, but I would always say just pick his style up in the TPB department or the trade paperback because the single issue is just it's not worth the price because of just how little happens. Norman Osborn being revealed is actually a con for me. I did not like that reveal because it seems like any time Bendis wants to instill some sort of like what's the word I'm looking for? He wants to instill some sort of enthusiasm for his book. He brings Norman Osborn back. He was shot in the head, and then he was hit on with a van multiple times, and he still comes freaking back.
How many times has he died and come back?
Twice now. Twice.
Damn.
And he clearly is never going to die. I mean, let's just be honest with ourselves right now. He's probably never going to die. Miles and Kate's relationship, there's really nothing there. You want to talk about, a lot of people were talking about in the original The Amazing Spider-Man, how it was all Twilight-y. This feels a heck of a lot more Twilight-y to me than The Amazing Spider-Man felt. There is no dynamic there, except it's just, oh, I love you, and I love you too. We're just supposed to accept these guys as being in love, and then it doesn't even go through trying to develop their relationship. And all of a sudden, he wants to tell her about it. Obviously, it was dealt with better in the other series because he probably was going out with her before the reboot happened. But I wasn't there before the reboot. And if anything needed to be established in the number one was their relationship in order to give what he said weight. Whereas these subplots with the Spider Twins that just came out of nowhere, it just doesn't work for me. But that was basically all that happened in this issue, and that's also another con is just how little happens in this issue, and that kind of makes me mad. But I guess there were enough positives to make you want to buy it in the end, sort of. But it just wasn't very good, so I gave it a C+.
See, here's the thing about that, and I told this story in the comments section of your review. I got to my comic shop, and I went up to the cashier. I had Learning to Crawl and Miles Morales in my hand, and he was like, "Oh, this is all you're picking up today?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, those are pretty good choices, especially the Miles Morales one, because I just read that, and oh boy, that's an issue." He literally said, he was literally like, "Oh boy, that's an issue," and I was like, "That's a good thing, right?" He's like, "That's a damn good thing," and so I was like, "Oh, okay." I guess this Miles Morales issue is actually going to be a decent number one. So I read the issue, and yeah, stuff kind of happens, but none of it makes me enthusiastic about the book. I'm not going to be as critical as Thomas. I'm going to give this issue a B-. I didn't think it was quite mediocre. The art is a pro for me. I love Dave Marquez's art in this issue. I didn't mind the whole Norman coming back thing because I just didn't mind it. I don't really have the attachment to this Ultimate Universe that Thomas does. I'm more of a 616 guy, but I've decided to pick up this Ultimate series just to, try to give the Ultimate Universe another shot, particularly Miles Morales. The main pro of the issue was the MJ scene. Loved the MJ scene and what that symbolized. Also, I love the flashback art of Ultimate Spider-Man number 25, 26, somewhere around there, where the Goblin throws MJ off the bridge. I really did like that. And the final reveal of Peter Parker. Do we think that's Peter Parker? I don't know. If it is Peter Parker, like Thomas said, yay, that's fantastic. If that's Peter Parker, then I'll probably start picking up Ultimate Spider-Man full time. But if it's not Peter Parker, I probably don't give a rat's ass because, honestly, like Thomas said, I don't think these single issues are worth the $3.99 that they charge for them. Because really, not a lot happens in every issue. If they had been charging, here's an example I kind of use. Had they been charging $3.99 for a Stan Lee Steve Ditko issue, honestly, I think that would have been a fair price because a lot happens in those issues. Stories are progressed, they are started and ended, and ultimately you feel like you're getting your money's worth. This is probably worth what a Lee Ditko issue was worth back in the 60s. Because, honestly, Bendis is a writer who writes better in trade. Everything he writes reads better in trade. It doesn't read well as a single issue. And so that is my one big con of this issue. And it's my one big problem with Bendis. And it's probably why I don't think I would put him on a top 10 Spider writers list. Because while he does tell some good stories and interesting stories, he drags them out so much. And it's just like, I heard someone on CBR say, or maybe it wasn't CBR, I don't know where it was, but I heard someone on some fan site say, Bendis takes 6 issues to tell a story that honestly could be told in half an issue. And I do agree with that statement. Bendis does draw out his issues and his stories a lot, and I feel that is to his detriment because it ultimately brings down the single issue quality. But ultimately, I'm not going to hate on this issue. I gave it a B-. I wasn't blown away by it. I'm giving this book 5 issues. So I'm basically giving it the first story arc to impress me, and if it doesn't, I'm probably going to drop it and just stay away from Ultimate for a while. But other than that, B- out of me. I had some pros. My main con was just the Bendis writing style, but that's really it. Thomas, any particular talking points on Miles Morales Ultimate Spider-Man number 1?
Well, I just kind of want to go back to the Bendis writing style. Is I picked up most of his original Peter run in trade, and even if you just read one single issue, kind of like a chapter in a storybook, it works a lot better than this does now. I just want to point that out, because when he had Peter Parker in the book, each single storyline, at least up until the end part where it started to get really drawn out with Death of Spider-Man, it really did make sense, and you felt a little bit more satisfied, whereas this, I didn't feel very satisfied at all. I was wondering what you thought about the Spider Twins.
Oh, see, I didn't care about them. Yep. I didn't think they were worth mentioning because they didn't do anything.
Yeah, I don't even know what they're doing there. It just didn't. It just seemed like a setup, which is fine, I guess, but it just seems like it had no payoff in this single issue. And obviously, I'm grading the single issue, so it really was a con for me. I'm curious as to what you really thought of the Kate and Miles relationship, because I obviously made my feelings on how much I didn't like it pretty clear.
Once again, I found it forgettable.
Yep.
That's anything I don't mention in my pros and cons, it's because it's forgettable or just not important to me. Mm-hmm. And honestly, the Kate Miles relationship, it didn't stick out to me. It was like, oh yeah, yay, we're in love, maybe, I don't know. It's like, yeah, it's typical teenage. To me, it does kind of seem like puppy love, at least from Miles' side. But really, it's forgettable for me.
Yeah.
Well,
I felt like it kind of diminishes how good the MJ scene was for me, because the MJ scene was all by itself. It was fantastic. I really liked it. Just as a scene by itself, but since it's about Kate and Miles' relationship, it just doesn't seem as big to me.
Oh, see, I personally, I say the MJ scene was the best scene in the book.
Well, I actually do agree. Yeah, but I think it's not as good as it could have been because it's about that relationship that I haven't grown to care about yet.
No, see, I was just happy to see Miles interacting with Peter Parker's supporting cast, so maybe that's why I loved it so much. I always like when Miles interacts with them. Again,
Yeah.
I haven't read too much of Ultimate Comics Spider-Man Volume 2, which was Miles' first series, but I do like when he interacts with Peter's supporting cast, so I think that's very solid. But other than that, do we have any other talking points in this issue?
Not really. I just don't like how kind of like Norman Osborn pops up for a second and then just leaves again. How they just show that he's getting away and then that's it. Obviously, they're still setting up, but oh my gosh, it's really drawn out for me. Obviously,
the cover of issue 3 obviously, hints at Miles fighting the Green Goblin, so we'll see where that goes in July. But and that is a detriment to this series as a whole, is just its release schedule. This is one a month, so honestly, it's like you barely get anything per month. It's kind of disappointing, but. Other than that, I guess, so C+ out of you, B- out of me. So any final thoughts on Miles Morales Ultimate Spider-Man #1?
No, it's just, as a person who really, really loves the Ultimate Universe, this is the Spider-Man that I didn't read 616 until after Ultimate Spider-Man. I got my first Spider-Man comic book in Ultimate Spider-Man, and I loved it. And it's just, I feel it's so sad that it's gotten down to the point where I just can't give it extremely positive grade anymore, and that really saddens me, quite honestly.
All right, my final thoughts on Ultimate Spider-Man #1. It's kind of forgettable. I don't think it's as much of a disappointment as Amazing Spider-Man #1 by Slott and Ramos, but I wasn't ultimately as disappointed by it. But maybe that's because I was a lot more hyped up for Amazing Spider-Man #1, and I wasn't really caring much about this one. But ultimately, I think what really did bring this down more was Bendis' writing style, and not necessarily that nothing happened. But moving on to the other current book this week, we got Amazing Spider-Man #1.1, which is Learning to Crawl issue #1, written by Dan Slott, art by Ramon Perez. Basic breakdown of this issue, it's basically just Peter Parker kind of dealing with the fact that, yes, he was responsible for Uncle Ben's death, and you see him as Spider-Man performing with Maxie. What is his name again? It's Maxie something. That's his agent. I think that name was established in the 90s. I don't remember who established it, but that is his agent from Amazing Fantasy 15, the guy that says, "Oh, I can get you on the Ed Sullivan Show." But, he does performances as Spider-Man. He basically just does all that stuff. And, sorry, my brain's, scattered at this point. But we get to see him basically feeling extreme guilt over the death of Uncle Ben. We see Uncle Ben's funeral, which I actually thought was kind of nice, a nice scene because of Aunt May, which we'll talk about later. But other than that, we get this kid named Clayton Cole, who is basically inspired by Spider-Man and wants to be just like him, so he turns himself into Clash. And that's a basic breakdown of the issue. Some minor scenes, of course, the Liz Allen scene, the J. Jonah Jameson scenes, all that was fairly good. Pros for this issue out of me, I love the fact that this issue felt like a classic 60s comic book. Dan Slott, I think, managed to capture the tone and feel of the 60s very well. I mean, I even said this to him on Twitter. I said that this was the best Spider book I'd read all week. And I stand by that statement. I think this is a great issue. It's probably the strongest issue of Spider-Man that Slott has written since probably issue 30 of Superior. And I know we've only had 2 issues in between that, but, it's easily one of the best issues of Spider-Man Slott's written in recent memory. I really, really enjoyed it for its classic 60s feel, and also just because to me, it felt like Peter Parker, and it felt like a classic Spider-Man story, and I really, really liked that. Of course, the angst with Uncle Ben was done very, very well in this issue. I felt that, the main scene that got to me was after Peter meets with the guidance counselor, Mr. Flanagan, I think his name is, and he's just about to perform as Spider-Man. And let me read you the dialogue. Mr. Flanagan originally said, "You're just a 15-year-old boy. What could you have done?" And Peter thinks to himself, "Just a 15-year-old boy. What could I have done? I thought counseling was supposed to help. All it's done so far is eat up my time and make me miss rehearsals. I've got a show to do. And all I can think about is all the things I could have done as Spider-Man. With my powers, super strength, spider sense," and then he's cut off by, buzzsaws and all that, because I think, of course, we got the fan references of the Chameleon and Quentin Beck in this issue, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. But I really love that scene because while it's not directly stated, that is the scene that destroys Peter mentally, and that is the scene that destroys him internally. And to me, that was the peak of his angst and guilt in this issue, and it was fantastic. Other pros for this issue, I did like the Uncle Ben funeral scene because it was great to see Aunt May's outlook on life. I really did like that she was so positive about the situation. She says, "We're surrounded by friends and loved ones. Every one of them a life Ben touched and made better for it. You're looking at the bounty of a life well lived. No man could ask for more." And then, of course, you see all those people, friends of the Parker family, giving them casseroles, which was a nice little funny bit of humor. Cons, I have only one real big con for this issue, and it was the art. I feel that this guy, Ramon Perez, or whatever his name is, I felt he's channeling the worst aspects of Humberto Ramos. I said in my review that his proportions are all over the place, and they kind of are, particularly in his drawing of Spider-Man. The big problem I have with it is the eyes. The eyes are so out of proportion with the face that it's just awkward to look at. I don't mind how he draws people, but, sometimes it does look a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? It does look a little bit clunky. It looks a little bit rushed, maybe a little bit groggy, I guess. It doesn't. I don't think rushed is a word that I can really use because I take that back. Rushed isn't a good word to describe it, but groggy, grainy, and kind of all over the place in terms of proportions. I didn't think that this issue was great in terms of art. That was my one real big con for the issue. Other than that, I give it an A-. It's probably the best, one of the best issues of Spider-Man Dan Slott has written in the past probably 6 months. It's probably one of the best issues he's written in a while. So I really, really enjoyed this issue. Thomas, breakdown, thoughts, and grade of... Well, you don't have to do a breakdown. Thoughts and grade of Amazing Spider-Man 1.1.
One of the biggest things that I actually really do like about this is, I think it might actually be one of the things that people might not like about it, is that Peter doesn't jump immediately from being the performer to being the hero, is that he originally takes Uncle Ben's statement of, with great power comes great responsibility, as a responsibility to take care of Aunt May. And that's the thing that he needs to do now. And so that's the kind of thing where he's like, I need to get money. And so that's the first thing that comes to his mind, and I really like that idea that that's the first thing that he thinks he should be doing. I like the kind of fan service that goes on here with J. Jonah Jameson and Quentin Beck in the story. I definitely like that. I will agree that the art didn't really sit too well with me. I mean, it wasn't horrible. I didn't hate it. I just didn't think it was very good. I didn't think it was anything to like really rave about. I like the scene with the Peter and his counselor basically going over basically what's bothering him, and I like that Aunt May's kind of worried about him in the way that she actually sends him to the counselor. Because he's missing school and skipping school, and it just kind of makes sense in a way that it never really made sense before. And Peter's kind of like facing this kind of turmoil, like he needs money. And I like that one scene where the guy comes up to him and says that Uncle Ben loaned him money, and he hands him a casserole, and he's basically like, "Yeah, right, about that." Um, basically asking, "Can we get that money back?" because he's really in the need of it. Um, uh, I definitely liked this issue. Um, in general, I'm gonna give it. I think I'll probably give it an A minus, like you. The art kind of hindered it for me, um, but other than that, I really liked pretty much everything about this issue. It was really well written. So,
All right, any specific talking points on learning to crawl?
I liked the point where he's like, Maxie says that he was a hero because he stopped that burglar. And Peter's like, "I am not a hero," and he hits him up against the wall and says, "You hear me? I am not one." And
I did like that moment. That was actually something I forgot about in my prose. I thought that was absolutely fantastic because it's not even that, to me, this is how I took it. Anytime he's referenced as that, it's just he knows he's not a hero, because if he was a hero truly, then he would have stopped that burglar at the TV station. Mm-hmm. So I love the symbolism of that. I think that's absolutely fantastic. I did love that scene.
Yeah, I kind of also feel like it's kind of funny to see that, not in like a funny as an amusing way, but it's kind of like he even believes what Jameson would be saying about him in the future now. Is that everyone is actually misinterpreting him as a hero, where he feels like this is something he should have done in the first place. It was his fault that Uncle Ben died, and all this other stuff. So I felt like it was a kind of an interesting, reversal of the kind of roles that the media is playing with Spider-Man. That everyone thinks he's kind of a hero, and it just kind of flips. So I think that's kind of interesting.
But anything else with learning to crawl number 1?
Clayton Cole. It sounds like a very Electro-esque storyline that's going to be happening here pretty soon.
Electro from the Amazing Spider-Man 2, we should clarify, not Electro from the 616 comics.
Yeah, from the Amazing Spider-Man 2 kind of way that they're doing that. I kind of like that kind of thing. I know it's a little bit cheesy-ish, but I like when that kind of happens because it makes you feel sorry for the villain. So I'm definitely looking forward to that as well.
This issue really didn't get me to feel sorry for Clayton Cole in any way. It just, to me, it does come off as the Amazing Spider-Man 2 Max Dillon. He's a Spider-Man fanatic, and I definitely see the comparisons there. In terms of Clash's design, I think we've talked about this on the podcast before. I really like his design. The purple and white, I read somewhere on CBR someone say that the purple and white doesn't really clash like his name says it will, but you know what, I still think it's a good look. I think it's a fairly decent look. I heard somewhere that they were going to use purple and yellow, but they were afraid it would be too much like the 616 Electro, which while that would have been a more clashing color scheme, I can see where they would have drawn comparisons with that. But overall, aesthetically, I think Clash looks very good.
Yeah, me too. I like his costume. So.
And that's really all we have to say about Amazing Spider-Man 1.1. So I think we both gave it an A-. So you know what? That's A's across the board. So that's fairly positive grades for a Dan Slott issue. And I will say, I said this in my review of Amazing Spider-Man 1.1. This issue had the quality that Amazing Spider-Man number 1 by Slott and Ramos should have had. I'll be quite honest with you, because I was thrilled with this issue, and I was disappointed with number 1. I really just do think that this issue is what ASM number 1 should have been. But
I agree with that, yeah.
All right, but
at least just the level of quality, like the feeling that something happens.
Absolutely. But moving on to classic issues now, we got 4 classic issues we're going to talk about today, and you might be asking, "Wow, 4 classic issues? That's a lot." It's because I realized we've been stuck in the Ditko era for like 3.5 months, and I really want to get to other eras, and I just know that at the 1, 2, 3 books per week speed that we're going at, we're not going to get there anytime soon to the stuff I really do want to talk about. Not that I don't want to talk about the Lee Ditko stuff, because I love the Lee Ditko stuff, but there's a lot of expanded Spider-Man mythology that I do want to talk about. But I do love the Lee Ditko stuff, so it's obviously very fun to talk about this stuff. But Amazing Spider-Man number 31 is the first issue we're going to tackle today. Thomas, give us a breakdown of this issue.
All right, so Spider-Man is basically swinging across town when he notices a group of masked men escaping by the helicopter from a plant that apparently produces nuclear material. He fights the men, and they dump the cargo into the water. He tries to go search for it, but they're gone. Woo! All right, so basically we don't really know who this person is, but he sends some people to go find the stuff. And so Spider-Man leaves, and Peter Parker actually shows up to go register at ESU after he got his free ride scholarship from how well he's doing in science. When Peter comes home, though, Aunt May collapses. And so Dr. Bromwell, this is back when doctors used to do house visits. They don't do that anymore. He comes and checks in on Aunt May, says that she's very, 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 very sick, and so sends her to the hospital. And then Peter's basically kind of like, what am I supposed to do? So he comes off to the newly introduced Harry Osborn and Gwen Stacy as kind of a dick. So the Daily Bugle newspaper is actually kind of suffering from the lack of news. So he basically sends Frederick Foswell to just go find something. He gets a tip about nuclear devices being loaded onto a ship. And then he gives it to Spider-Man because he's not really sure if the tip's, accurate. And then Spider-Man stops the theft and finds out about someone called the Master Planner. And it turns out this guy is plotting his revenge, I guess. And then 2 doctors are finishing up tests on Aunt May. And then they come to the conclusion that Aunt May probably won't be around much longer.
All right, good breakdown, Thomas. Thoughts on the issue?
I definitely like it. I definitely like Peter Parker kind of taking his responsibility with Aunt May a little bit more seriously. Obviously, he's been kind of overwhelmed, which you kind of understand because he's had Spider-Man stuff. He's got to register for college. He's got all this stuff going on in his life, and then all of a sudden Aunt May has to get sick as well. So he's got to make decisions, and this is just the kind of Spider-Man story that I absolutely love. I love Steve Ditko's art. It's that classic Spider-Man art, so you can't really dislike it. I liked seeing Harry Osborn and Gwen Stacy for the first time as he gets into college. It's definitely one of those big moments. And I like the Master Planner stuff. I think this is actually one of the first story arcs, besides the Green Goblin one, where they start building up to who is the Master Planner, what does this all lead to, and so I definitely like that kind of plot element being brought in. So it's definitely, I think it's a solid A for me. Actually, I give it an A+. I don't really think I had too much issue with it. So,
all right. And in terms of my thoughts on this issue, like Thomas, I really enjoyed it. I'll give it a solid A. I didn't think it was quite worthy of an A+, but I do think it is a solid A for me. It's a very, very, very solid issue. The first pro that I want to bring up is, I don't know if you noticed this, Thomas, but Ditko's art in this issue is better than it's ever been.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that. Yeah,
I love Steve Ditko's art. I mean, as we've gone through the Lee Ditko era, I have expressed praise towards Ditko multiple times. This is obvious. This is, quite honestly, his best issue by this point in the series, and I think it's probably his best issue that I've seen personally. Mm-hmm. I've read every single Lee Ditko issue at least once, and honestly, this is the best I can remember his art being, so I really think he knocked it out of the ballpark with this issue. I mean, It looks absolutely fantastic. I think Spider-Man in particular looks very, very good. Proportions are nice and good. The lines are nice and clean. Structure's very solid. And overall, it's just very, very well done. In terms of the introduction of Gwen Stacy and Harry Osborn, I mentioned a few minutes ago that I wanted to get to more of the expanded Spider-Man mythology. That is what I'm talking about. The characters of Harry, Gwen, Mary Jane, all of them, that's what I am really excited to get to. And really, they did a killer job introducing them in this issue. I mean, I personally adore the scene where they pull the prank on Peter in the science lab, and they get him in trouble with Professor Warren, who is also introduced in this issue, who will obviously become a big player in the Gary Conway run. But we obviously, I mean, I adore that scene. Personally, for me, I think it was absolutely fantastic. I love the dynamic that Gwen is sort of attracted to Peter, but she isn't quite sure about him. I did like that quite a bit. The Aunt May situation, yes, we've seen this situation twice before. We've seen it in Amazing number 9 and in Amazing numbers 18 and 19. But honestly, this was the best it had ever been done. And really, it's just the desperate, and especially with such desperate times and such a landmark time in Peter Parker's life, I felt that it was brilliantly done, and I really, really liked it. And this was a minor con for me, I didn't think the action was amazing. The action sequences were okay, but I wouldn't put them as the best action sequences I've seen from Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. I felt that ultimately they were okay, not anything special, and that's really why this issue isn't an A+ for me, is I wasn't too enthused about the action, but solid A out of me for this issue. So Thomas, I have a talking point here. What overall did you think about the introductions of Harry and Gwen?
I thought they were handled well. I mean, like, I didn't really want a full-blown kind of introduction where they make such a big deal. I like that they're kind of bringing them in slowly, kind of developing their personality slower. It makes for a bigger payoff later than just trying to say, here he is, and giving you his whole life story there. I kind of like learning the characters as Peter does. So I definitely liked the introduction. Gwen Stacy, the Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker thing is definitely setting up a conflict of the romantic conflict that they're going to have eventually, and we all know, thanks to Gary Conway, where that all leads. But I definitely like the introductions. I really like the introductions. I think they were handled beautifully.
I adored the introductions of Harry and Gwen in this issue. I mean, I've reviewed this issue on the front page of the site, and I think I gave it a lower grade than what I gave it here. But rereading it again today, I really enjoyed this issue. I can't give it anything lower than an A. I really did. And like Thomas, I enjoyed the fact that J. Jonah Jameson was so desperate for news that he literally says to Foswell, "Find me some news, find something. I don't care what it is."
Classic JJJ.
It could be a rat shitting down the president's throat. I don't care.
Exactly.
But that was a classic JJ scene. But overall, I'd say we both get. Thomas gave this issue an A+. I gave it a solid A. I really enjoyed it. I don't really have any other talking points. Thomas, do you have any other talking points with Amazing 31?
No, not really. Master Planner, we know that it's going to lead somewhere. I definitely liked the introduction of that kind of mystery. I think that's also what works really well in the Spider-Man comics. I really hope that if they're going to introduce, and this is still related, that if they're going to introduce Doc Ock in the next Spider-Man film, that they start out Master Planner style, because I think that would be a great way to introduce him.
All right. So, as we move along here, we have Amazing Spider-Man issue number 32, and I forgot to mention that all 4 of the classic issues that we are reviewing today are scripted and edited by Stan Lee and plotted and drawn by Steve Ditko, so got to give appropriate credits there. Amazing Spider-Man issue 32, it starts out with the reveal that the Master Planner really is Dr. Octopus, and of course, that's not really a shock. Peter Parker and Betty Brant have a little scene where Peter attempts to make Betty Brant hate him, which doesn't really go all that well and causes directs the attention of J. Jonah Jameson towards them, and it really just doesn't go well for anyone. The doctors tell Peter that Aunt May has radiation in her blood, and Peter is infuriated by this because he knows that it is his fault because of the blood transfusion he gave her in, was it issue number 10? I
think it was. I can't be sure. I'd have to look back at it.
I believe it was issue number 10, because I'm pretty sure it was right after her illness, during the first appearance of Electro. So I'm pretty sure that's when it was. And I love this panel. We get this panel of Peter destroying a table, and it's absolutely fantastic. I love Ditko's art during that scene. We get Spider-Man going to Dr. Connors to hopefully create a cure for the radiation blood deterioration in Aunt May. And Doc Connors says they need something called ISO 36. Coincidentally, Doc Ock also needs that for his experiments, and they steal it upon its arrival. So Spider-Man basically goes on a rampage throughout the city looking for the Master Planner. He eventually finds the Master Planner, learns that it's Doc Ock, and fights him for a brief period of time. Their battle is very short and leads to the collapse of the structure onto Spider-Man, and ultimately he's stuck under a bunch of rubble by the end of the issue, and that's really the end of the issue. So what are my thoughts on this issue? I'll start with my grade. I wouldn't give this one an A. I'll give it a solid B. I think it is a good issue. The Betty and Peter scene, this is going to be more of a talking point. I don't know quite how to feel about this scene. It's interesting. I'm interested to get your opinion on it, Thomas. In terms of the action sequences in this issue are actually fairly good. I actually really did enjoy them. I loved Spider-Man rampaging around the town, demanding that people tell him where the Master Planner is. I just love that. To me, that was Spider-Man fueled by desperation, and honestly, to me, those are some of the best stories. I'm not saying he needs to be fueled by desperation all the time, but I did feel that was absolutely great. The big con I had for this issue was just they tied the Aunt May plot and the Master Planner plot in the stupidest way possible. Doc Ock just happens to need the very thing that Aunt May needs to be cured. I know this was the 60s, and I know that's classic 60s cheesy writing, but I just couldn't get past that, so that brought the grade down for me. I'll give this issue a B. I thought it was fairly good. Not quite as good as the last issue. We don't see any of Peter Parker's social life except for the brief scene at the Bugle in the beginning. But other than that, I think it's a fairly solid issue. So, Thomas, thoughts and grade on Amazing Spider-Man number 32?
I actually didn't have much of a problem with the ISO 36 kind of plot because I feel like it actually drives Peter Parker against Doc Ock in a way that we really haven't seen before. And I thought it was an interesting dynamic. So I kind of disagree on that one. However, I did not like the Peter with Betty scene. Whereas you didn't know what to feel about it, I definitely didn't like it. I felt it was a scene that was kind of, it didn't really play out well. I don't think it kind of made Peter kind of unlikable in a way. And I mean, like, I know he's been going through a lot, but why would he, I don't know why he would think why he should do that to make her hate him altogether. It just doesn't seem like something that I'd want him to do. I liked the kind of thing where they harken back to his blood transfusion. I definitely thought that was a pretty solid thing. The Master Planner reveal is actually a con that I have. It's not because, it was Dr. Octavius. That's fine, obviously. I just felt like it was too fast. If you watch the Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon, they draw it out for a while, and so you're kind of like, oh, that's fun. And they actually, because they know that most people who actually like that plot have read the comics, they kind of actually make you believe it's someone else and not Doc Ock, but they actually reveal it is Doc Ock. So I definitely like that the storyline in the cartoon better, but obviously this is the '60s. You get through a lot more. You have to kind of reveal it quickly, but I just wish it would have gone on a little bit longer because everything, especially Bendis's work, is drawn out even further now. Even Dan Sly, who writes a lot more content than a lot of other comic writers, draws things out more than back in the day. So, I would give it an A. No, I'll give it a B plus. I didn't like the Betty Brant scene, and I didn't like the fact that it was revealed so soon. But everything else was fine with me. I didn't mind the rest of it. Steve Ditko's art continues to be a pro for me. There was nothing wrong with that. I like the fight scene between him and Doc Ock. And I like the kind of predicament that they leave Spider-Man in at the end, so.
And I did just look it up. Amazing Spider-Man number 10 was the issue of the blood transfusion, so they are hearkening back to ASM number 10 there with that plot. Here's why I don't know how to feel about the Betty Brant scene at the beginning. Peter has good intentions. His execution is questionable. I mean, his actions are questionable because, I mean, I think of the Madonna song, "The road to hell is paved with good intentions." Mm-hmm. That's kind of the scenario that I'm kind of thinking of here, is he's doing some questionable and maybe bad things, but he has good intentions. So that's why I kind of don't know how to feel about this. I disagree with you about the Doc Ock reveal. I thought it was fine that it was revealed like this. I didn't mind it. Yes, I kind of would have preferred had it been revealed when Spider-Man got to the Master Planner's lair, but ultimately it didn't bother me that much. I didn't think it was a particular con of the issue. But other than that, I don't really have much else to say about this issue. It was a fairly solid issue, and ultimately I didn't really have too much of a problem with it. I gave it a B. Again, the ISO 36 being what both parties needed, that was a con, but other than that, I didn't really have much of a problem with this issue. So, Thomas, we're going to move on to Amazing Spider-Man issue number 33. And
the final chapter.
Yes, take us through this one, Thomas.
All right, so it basically starts out where the other one left off, with Spider-Man trapped under all this rubble, and he basically there's this pretty cool inner dialogue that he has as he feels guilt about Uncle Ben and saying that he can't let Aunt May suffer too. So he basically finds it within himself to lift, what is it? I think it's 10 tons, right?
I don't think it's ever said how many tons of rubble, but it's a large amount.
Yeah, and he lifts it off of himself. But unfortunately, he hurts his leg, but he manages to grab the serum, and it's all flooded. So basically, the Master Planner's layer is destroyed. So he finds himself. He finds more of the Master Planner's henchmen waiting for him as he gets out, and this is again kind of like Spider-Man in desperation. He beats them up pretty quickly and pretty brutishly, and then heads to Kurt Connors. He tests it on himself, and he basically says, "Okay, this ought to work on Aunt May," and so he basically goes over there with the serum and finds the doctor, and he gives it to the doctor to give to Aunt May. And then Spider-Man goes back to the Daily Bugle, and then he gives the pictures to the Daily Bugle. Betty basically kind of talks to Peter about how shocked she is about the bruises and everything, about him getting beaten up. And she's kind of getting a little freaked out because she loves Peter still. And he's kind of going along the path that her brother went along, and so she's kind of getting a little anxious about that. And so he basically antagonizes Jameson, asking for a lot more money so that he can pay for Aunt May's hospital bills. And so he actually gets the money with classic JJJ saying how generous he is. And then he basically finds the results on Aunt May, and it seems the ISO 36 has cured Aunt May, and Peter goes home and gets rest.
Next issue, the return of Kraven the Hunter.
Yep.
And then we get letter pages. All right, thoughts, Thomas?
I thought it was a pretty solid issue. I liked this Betty scene better than the last one. Betty kind of worrying about Peter, although it is kind of classic 60s girlfriend stuff again, as we said before, and kind of the worry about Peter, but it didn't bother me as much as the last one did. So I liked the kind of idea of how his leg was hurt and how he still does all the stuff that he needs to save Aunt May, which shows the determination that he had along with everything else. I really like that. It's a pretty solid issue. Obviously, it ends with the classic, I managed to save Aunt May, I managed to save the person I love kind of plot that Peter's been having ever since Uncle Ben's death. So obviously it falls on the side of predictable, but who wants a sad superhero comic book, especially during the 60s? So this is all right. I definitely like the issue. I wouldn't call it anything truly spectacular. So I'd give it kind of a solid B on this one.
I'm actually kind of surprised by that because this is a fairly iconic issue from the Ditko era, because if not the most iconic issue from the Ditko era, because, this issue has the classic panel of Spider-Man lifting the rubble off of him, and I was kind of surprised that you didn't really hit up on that very much, because I personally thought that was probably one of the best scenes of the entire Ditko era.
I did like that scene. It just didn't make the issue for me, quite honestly.
Honestly, it's just what this stands for, his love for his Aunt May, his vindication, his dedication to the good cause, what's the word I'm looking for? His kind of belief in not giving up. All of that stuff is very much symbolized here, and I think it's a great, great scene, and I absolutely love how Lee and Ditko wrote it, because obviously Lee scripted it, but Ditko plotted it. I absolutely adored how they did that, and I absolutely adore the 2 pages where Spider-Man is lifting the rubble off of himself, because on pages 4 and 5, page 4 is him, in the beginning stages of lifting it up, and then page 5, he successfully managed to lift it off of himself. I adore those pages visually. I think they're absolutely great, and easily some of the best art we've seen from Steve Ditko. And something else I like about it, Spider-Man, his leg is injured, he's tired, he's beaten, and yet the moment he jumps out of a river, he fights 8 guys. He fights 8 of Master Planner's men and wins pretty easily. Yeah. Why? Because of the fact that he is determined to get this serum to Aunt May, and I absolutely loved it. Mm-hmm. The one thing about the issue that made me go WTF was the whole thing of, we're doctors operating under the law, but we're just going to let this masked vigilante tell us how to operate on this woman. I was kind of thinking, okay, that's not really, I'm pretty sure one of you is going to lose your doctor's
job.
Yeah, you're going to lose your medical license or whatever.
Well, I'm surprised that they didn't know that this was kind of the thing that they needed already. They're supposed to be trained in this kind of stuff, and it was Dr. Connors that knew. He's not even the doctor in the way that these guys are doctors, so...
That was just kind of a weird thing for me. It doesn't lower the grade too much. It was just okay, I'm pretty sure that's against about 10 laws.
Yeah.
But in terms of the Peter and Betty scene towards the end of the issue, I was meh on it. I'm caring less and less about the Peter-Betty breakup drama as the series progresses, so I'm not really that kind of enthused about this scene. I do love the scene where Peter sells the pics to Jonah Jameson. Obviously he's I want $100 per picture, and he's And Jonah thinks to himself, I'm robbing him by doing that. They're worth at least twice as much. But whatever. He doesn't have to know that. I love that. That's classic JJ right there.
Yep.
And that's
J.
really
Jonah Jameson.
That's really all I have to say about this issue. As a grade, I'd give it an A-. I actually really like this issue. I do feel that in terms of the 3 issues of the Master Planner arc, number 31 was the best for me, but this was very close in terms of quality. I think 31 did just benefit from the introduction of 2 very classic characters, but this one had a very iconic Spider-Man moment, and probably one of my favorite moments from the entire Ditko era. So that really just did resonate well with me. So Thomas, any particular talking points on Amazing Spider-Man number 33? You stated that you thought the lifting up the rubble scene was all right. You didn't think it was very. Do you think that it's kind of overrated?
No, I don't think it's overrated. I definitely like the scene in and of itself. And it definitely does show, like, the kind of love that he has for his Aunt May. But we also get that later as well, and I think the whole thing's about the determination. So in the context of the story, it doesn't have as much bearing as I probably would like it to be for such an iconic moment. I definitely think it's not overrated, though. I definitely think that it is the kind of scene that will last you forever, and I definitely agree it is one of the most, if not the most, iconic. However, I don't think iconic scenes really make or break an issue, so it didn't really influence my grade too much, to be quite honest.
I'm not saying that the iconicness of it influenced my grade. What I'm saying is just I understand why it's an iconic scene, because it's a great scene, and I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But I guess we don't really have anything else to say about Amazing Spider-Man 33. The one thing I love about this is Spider-Man has literally just lifted 20 or however many tons of rubble off of himself, and yet he gets out of a river and fights 10 guys and destroys them all. To me, that was awesome.
And his leg was hurt.
I love that. I don't know why I love that so much. It was just, to me, it symbolized how dedicated Spider-Man is, but also just how strong Spider-Man is, and I absolutely loved it.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess now we will move on to Amazing Spider-Man number 34, the last issue we are covering today, titled The Thrill of the Hunt, featuring the return of the somewhat magnificent menace of Kraven the Hunter. Of course, like the previous 3 issues, this issue was scripted and edited by Stan Lee and plotted and illustrated by Steve Ditko. The issue, a basic breakdown of it, Kraven returns to New York to kind of redeem himself after his previous 2 defeats at the hands of Spider-Man in issues 15 and Annual number 1, respectively. Betty has a horrible dream that Peter reveals himself to be Spider-Man, and she wakes up from the nightmare and she thinks, oh my gosh, that would be the worst thing ever. Aunt May is recovering very, very well and very quickly. Meanwhile, Peter Parker is kind of dealing with the ramifications of his actions in issue 31, where he was kind of ignorant to everything that was going on around him. And so Harry and Gwen are really not giving him the time of day, even when he tries to be a nice guy. So Kraven decides... excuse me. Kraven decides to dress up as Spider-Man and kind of stalk J. Jonah Jameson in a ploy to draw the real Spider-Man out to him. His plot works, and Spider-Man goes to find him, discovers that the fake Spider-Man is Kraven. They fight, and their fight gets intermingled with a little bit of a gang kind of thing, who is also after Spider-Man. So Spider-Man ultimately ends up having to fight the gang and Kraven at the same time. He wins against all of them, and ultimately, at the end of the issue, it is revealed that Betty Brant has left the Daily Bugle and has gone off to who knows where, and Peter is thinking about how he must get Betty out of his mind forever. In terms of this issue, I will say that I'd probably I'll give it a B plus. I'll give it somewhere in the B range. It wasn't a spectacular issue for me. I do think that it was a fairly forgettable one, but it wasn't horrible. I do think it definitely has its good parts to it. First off, the pros. I love Spider-Man's quips in this issue. To me, this is probably one of the best issue in terms of quippage that Stan Lee and Steve Ditko have put out throughout this first 38 issue run. I really like Spider-Man's quips in this. A few of them made me laugh out loud, and really they were just very, very solid. I like the ramifications that Peter's having to deal with in terms of his social life. I really, really liked the scenes at ESU with Peter, Harry, and Gwen. I really do like that. Gwen is kind of being a bitch, but of course, that's classic 60s girlfriend for you, so what are you going to do? But she does still kind of have that internal struggle about Peter Parker and thinking, oh, well, maybe he's not such a bad guy. He tried to help me pick up my book earlier. He's trying to be nice to me now. Maybe something was wrong, when he was ignoring all of us back, a few issues ago. So I did like that. I felt that was good. In terms of Kraven and his role in this issue, honestly, I felt he was probably the weakest part of the issue because none of his scenes really enthused me that much. It's like, oh, I'm going to dress up as Spider-Man. Okay, we saw the Chameleon do that in issue number 1. Oh, I'm going to lure Spider-Man into a trap. Okay, exact same plot from issue number 15. The only added advantage you have is that there's a gang of thugs that also wants to beat the crap out of him. So it wasn't very original. I didn't think it was very, very impressive. And the way Kraven goes down with 3 punches to the jaw, not even to the jaw, but it's just 3 punches from Spider-Man. I get that Spider-Man's very powerful and he packs a very powerful punch, but to me that just wasn't a satisfying defeat for Kraven. I didn't really like that. But my final pro of the issue would be no more Betty, ? Woohoo! Yes, no more Betty Brant. No more terrible, terrible writing. Yes, thank gosh. But as a grade, I'd give this issue I'll give it a solid B. It wasn't amazing, but it wasn't terrible either. B minus, somewhere around there. So Thomas, thoughts and grade on Amazing Spider-Man number 34?
I kind of like that. I always like when this kind of serialized where there's reactions to Peter's behavior. I like that Harry and Gwen are kind of, treating him, like he kind of treated them, and I kind of like that kind of aspect of it. Kraven, I don't think he was actually, and this is just my opinion, I don't think it was actually a very good villain until Kraven's Last Hunt comes around. I think he is, that was basically where it kind of ends, where it kind of he starts being a compelling character. But before that point, I think he's always been kind of like the laughing stock of Spider-Man villains. I think even the title, or what Stan Lee kind of said about it, kind of says that, yeah, he's kind of the laughing stock of the Spider-Man villains as of right now.
Thomas is referring to the somewhat magnificent menace of Kraven the Hunter.
Exactly. And I think that's clearly alluded to by the fact that Spider-Man beats him with 3 punches. And then the gang thing, that's all right. It just that was one of the other plot points that just seemed to come out of like nowhere. It didn't seem to have much of a place in it, but that's okay. I don't really mind it too much. It's just kind of like, why is that there? It's not really needed. And then Betty leaves. And I can say that with every fiber of my being that I like that she is finally gone. She is, for me, the weakest Spider-Man girlfriend. I know John and James don't really like Carly. I don't mind Carly as much as they do, but Betty Brant for me is just the weakest out of all of them.
I totally agree with that statement. Betty is the worst girlfriend for Peter Parker.
Yeah, I didn't like it. And so I'm going to give this issue a B minus. There's nothing like truly bad about it. There's just nothing truly good either. It's pretty much, kind of like an average like if Stan Lee could get average, this would probably be where he would be, where it's like he's not bringing his A game for it. This is what it kind of felt like to me. So B- from me.
I feel like this was kind of maybe I'm just thinking about this too hard. Maybe this was kind of a okay, let's slow down kind of issue, because after we had this big master planner arc with all these characters being introduced and all this big action and these iconic moments, maybe they were just trying to slow down a little bit and give us a nice kind of more simple, laid back kind of issue.
That might be it. But it almost seems like as we know, Stan Lee was writing a lot of the books at that time, and it seems like he was probably I can't say this for sure, but he probably was in the middle of like a big thing for like Fantastic Four or Avengers, and he just wanted to do like a simple issue for the Amazing Spider-Man is what I think he probably did.
Well, Ditko was the main plotter of this book, so the main story aspect really falls on him.
Well, yeah, but it didn't seem like, I mean, it didn't really seem like I'm not even really talking about the story. I'm talking about just the way it was scripted in general. It just kind of feels like not lazy, but just kind of like I'm going to do what I have to make a relatively compelling story, but I can't do much more than this. So,
see, I actually really praised the script in this issue. I thought it was actually fairly good. But any other talking points that we have in terms of this issue?
It's just like, I mean, Kraven, I don't really like personally as a villain as much. I think Mysterio has a better comedic aspect of him than Kraven does. So I always like Mysterio. I've always liked Mysterio more than Kraven the Hunter in terms of the comedic aspect that he kind of brings. Kraven the Hunter, I always felt was one of the weaker aspects of Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery personally. So when you have an issue that deals with him, you're kind of gonna be inherently not like it as much as another issue, just because of that.
All right. So that's really gonna wrap it up for the classic issues today. Next week, plan on at least 6 classic reviews, because there's literally no Spider books coming out next week. I checked. There are like literally no Spider books coming out next week. So yeah, I'm pretty sure next week is probably going to be classic reviews galore, which I'm actually really happy about, because that means we can even get through more issues, and we can get to the 2 issues that I really want to talk about, which is 39 and 40. But first off, we got to get through the rest of the Ditko era. So next week, at least expect the end of the Ditko era, and probably the start of the John Romita Sr. era. I haven't quite decided yet, but at least expect the end of the Ditko era. But that's really going to do it for this episode of the Amazing Spider-Man podcast.
Are we also going to do viewer questions next week?
We might. I don't know.
Okay.
That depends on my mood.
Okay.
But Thomas, any final words for the listeners before we sign off?
Well, no, just, we got some pretty cool Spider-Man stuff out. I wouldn't recommend picking up the Amazing Spider-Man 2 game. I actually finished that. I have to do the review for it, like I promised, but I haven't gotten around to it yet because I've been doing the Ultimate Spider-Man stuff. I wouldn't recommend picking it up until at least drops down to like $30, because it's a relatively mediocre game. But other than that, I don't really have any final words.
All right. My final words for the listeners are, in terms of our Amazing Spider-Man 2 movie podcast, that will be up on probably Tuesday. I'm anticipating putting it up on Tuesday, assuming that the recording goes smoothly and everything. I'm anticipating, because we are scheduled to record it on Sunday, so I'm anticipating releasing it on Tuesday, kind of giving everyone a chance to listen to this episode. So probably Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. Tuesday or Wednesday, I'll release the Amazing Spider-Man 2 movie podcast. We will try to not make that 5 hours, but we don't know how long we're going to take.
Ooh, interesting.
We don't know how long we're going to take, but yeah, expect one of our a longer show out of that. But
hey, John.
What?
This apparently just came out. I was looking around on YouTube while you were doing that, and Seven Webheads posted a video that Irfan Khan, who played what's his face in the original Spider-Man, might be coming back for the Amazing Spider-Man 3.
Okay, don't care.
All right. Well, just saying, just in case you wanted to talk about it, but okay.
But final words for the listeners are, check out the site, theamazingspiderman.com, dashes in between every word. We got some cool stuff coming up there, and, just keep reading Spider-Man, and go back and read some of those classic issues. I highly recommend them. Next week, we're going to cover the end of the Ditko era, so we will see you guys later.